All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Detroit Lions podcast. I am Jeff Weidenhofer, your host for today. This is the Detroit Lions podcast Mental Health Edition. Stick with me if it's weird, if it's awkward, if you're like, no, thanks. All right. Just give it a shot. Give it a shot. Okay. I'm a licensed mental health professional. I've been a Detroit Lions fan since I was a teenager in the 90s. And today I work for the federal government as a psychotherapist. I'm a mental health counselor. I primarily work with combat veterans, victims of physical and emotional abuse, people who have endured sexual assault, and people suffering from anxiety, depression, and all kinds of other symptoms and disorders. And everything I say here is my own opinion. It does not reflect the policies or viewpoints of any federal department or government agency. Okay, I just want to introduce this podcast series today and get into a few discussion points that I think are interesting, right? And I'm trying to build on something that Chris and Riz have kept saying over the last year, right? Maybe even longer. This is a presentation of mental health topics related to the experiences of a Detroit Lions fan, primarily focused on who we were, what happened over the last 2 years, who we are now, and who we can be, possibly. Right? To get technical here, I'm going to talk about identity. I'm going to talk about the dynamics of change, cognitive distortions, defense mechanisms, negativity bias, dysfunctional patterns, psycho-awareness, and the rewards of being an NFL fan, right? Being touched in our fandom. Heard that before. Chris and Riz keep talking about how Lions fans are going to have to learn, ... right? They keep saying, we're going to have to get used to. In a recent episode, I heard Chris say, get used to being a favorite. Get used to being a fan of a really good team. So he's talking about change. He's talking about the way we think, respond, behave, and communicate. Right? I know this is murky territory for many of you. Many of you might have a first inclination to dismiss what I'm talking about. And believe me, you're in good company if that's your initial response, okay? You're listening to someone who was a military guy for a long time. I was a Navy helicopter pilot for a decade. I've done 4 deployments to the Middle East. You're listening to someone who has spent much of his adulthood, parts of childhood, being emotionally avoidant, even dismissive, which means what I'm trying to say is trying to be the tough guy, trying to be someone who just isn't bothered by stuff, hesitant to kind of go there and feel that and recognize that. And that's a lot of the people that I work with too. I think one problem with being emotionally avoidant or dismissive is that we often miss out on a lot of good stuff. And I'm not talking about becoming some touchy-feely, awkward, crying all the time weirdo. I'm talking about becoming more genuine, authentic, living in harmony with the core of who we are as humans, as members of a family, a community, employees, bosses, siblings, parents, kids, neighbors, and fans. So even if this is murky, strange, or awkward, I encourage you to keep listening if there's an ounce of curiosity growing in you. We Lions fans have gone through extraordinary changes over the last 2 years. It's wild for me to think where we were for so long and where we are now. Fans of a contender, a favorite, a really good team. For most of us, there's probably already been some degree, maybe a lot of change in our perspective, our opinions, and also how we relate, how we think, how we respond and communicate and behave. And my guess is that many of us are still in a process of change, which means there's more to come. We are learning to experience this new era and respond differently. And we can help that process if we see it more clearly. That's why I wanted to do this. Some background on me. I grew up in Royal Oak. I turned 13 in 1988. A year later, Barry Sanders was drafted and started watching him playing, and I was hooked, emotionally attached to the Detroit Lions, right? And like all relationships, sometimes we are not treated so well. Sometimes we don't treat our partner so well. Sometimes we don't treat ourselves very well. Sometimes, though, we're rewarded to the point of tears. Anybody feel that over the last season? I did. Game in Minnesota in December. If he took that interception away, ripped it out of Justin Jefferson's hands, division title. First one in a long time. Ridiculously long time. That felt awesome. And I watched people on TV express tears. The wild card playoff game, beating Matthew Stafford, who is in many ways, our brother, with an emotional attachment there because he was with us for so long. Then we did that divisional playoff game. Derek Barnes rips down that interception. Holy shite, going to the NFC Championship. And then crushing the 49ers 4.5. And we all know how that ended. And we have to revisit all that right now. But back to me, out of high school, I went to college out in Annapolis, Maryland. I went to the Naval Academy, got my ass kicked physically, academically. Also had some really good times and made really great friends there. Graduated in 1997, commissioned as an officer, went to flight training down in Florida, then more helicopter flight training out in San Diego, California. I live by the airport, so if you can hear that plane go, if you can hear the plane going overhead, that's what that is. Just got to live with that. Sorry about that. California, then Virginia, where I joined my squadron, and I did 3 deployments in the early 2000s out to the Middle East. I did another deployment out to the Persian Gulf, working on ships, helping helicopters land and take off about a decade after all those deployments. So I tell you this because I want to build some comfortability, some trust, some rapport with you. I want you to know some of the things that shaped me. And some of those experiences I just listed shaped me in really great ways. And in other ways, that present some difficulties that really in my life now I'm kind of coming to terms with, things that are challenging, right? Like many of you and many military veterans, I am a pro at protecting myself emotionally. What am I talking about there? And this is one of the central points of this series. And for now, I'll just leave it at this. We Lions fans have a long history of protecting ourselves, and many of those behaviors and thought patterns are still with us. And I hope that some of you understand through this series that those behaviors and patterns do not always serve us well. They don't always help. Sometimes we miss out on some good stuff, okay? A little bit more about me. I married around when I was deploying during the time in the Navy, met the love of my life and got married. And she was also a Navy helicopter pilot. After we both got out of the military, moved to New York City and got off active duty and started a different career. And then we had 2 kids, lived in Queens and Brooklyn for 10 years, and then moved out to New Orleans, for there for about 2 years, then moved out to Hawaii, then out to Colorado near Denver. And now just recently moved back to San Diego, California. And I tell you this because I've watched these Lions games, I've listened to these podcasts, I've read the articles, I've been on the message boards from many different time zones in the midst of many different fan bases. New York Giants, New York Jets. Back when the Washington team was the Redskins, I was immersed in that BS, if you will. What did I say? Saints in Denver, out in Broncos territory for a couple of years. That's when they were really bad. And like many of you, I experienced my fandom of the Lions from people who don't give a shit about about my team. And so I just want to share that with you. Today, I work with people recovering from combat trauma and sexual trauma and abuse of all kinds, and addiction and anxiety and depression, thought disorders, suicidality, and a lot of other mental health disorders. And the most common disorders I see are the ones that are bookmarked in my DSM-5 are anxiety, depression, and PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which originates from a traumatic experience. And some books describe trauma as an experience where we have a sense that our livelihood is threatened. Could be ourselves, could be the people around us. Right? Those experiences affect people greatly. And I bring these disorders up for a reason. which I'll get to in a second. But first, I want to say the work I do is very serious. If you've ever, been through something traumatic and gotten counseling or been through counseling for any other reason, the work is very serious. I work with people who have gone through very difficult times and are still affected and suffering, perhaps years and decades after an experience. Right? I'm sure many of you can relate. And so talking about mental health in the context of a sports fan is not meant to diminish anyone's real struggle. It's not meant to poke fun or be cynical. Okay. So I want to place a separation between trauma, abuse, addiction, and forms of suffering and our experiences as fans. But as you might notice in the language I use around anxiety, depression, PTSD symptoms, there are similarities. Suffering, pain, impulsive behaviors, impulsive responses, communication problems, right? Some of the lessons that people learn while doing deep, raw, visceral, tear-jerking, life-changing work are relatable to other less serious parts of our life. And that's why I wanted to do this and offer this up and contribute this to the Detroit Lions podcast, because I think TDLP is a really beautiful outlet. It's a great community for us. I think it's very healthy. At times it's light. At times it's really funny. At times it's drunk. At other times it's raw. And it's a healthy expression of what we're going through. I also think the culture in the Detroit Lions podcast has a lot of curiosity, right? Willingness to learn, enthusiasm for insightfulness, learning insight, what's really going on, right? And to me, that also is equatable with humility and maturity. When we are insightful, when we are trying to really understand what's going on, right? Mentally mature in that way. And Chris often says the Slack chat is the smartest. I forget what the smartest Slack chat or online chat, well, Detroit Lions chat. I don't think he's saying that every single person in the chat works for Pro Football Focus and has their a deep handle on offensive design, defensive design, special teams, and the salary cap and free agency valuation. Many people do, many contributors do. Ash, Riz, all these other people who contribute to the Detroit Lions podcast. But I also think when Chris says it's the smartest, I think he's talking about something a little bit beyond just football knowledge. I think he is also implying, to some degree, people are enthusiastic to learn and listen, to some degree, sometimes, right? So I like a culture of insightfulness and I equate that to maturity. I think TDLP is a pretty mature place compared to, a lot of the radio shows I've listened to over the years in other cities, things I see on national television, right? We all know what goes on ESPN sometimes, right? Sometimes it's great. Sometimes just they do not know what they're talking about because they're not looking deep enough into it. They're not actually paying attention to the Detroit Lions. I listened to a Ringer podcast yesterday. I don't think these two guys really watched Jared Goff. I don't think they've really watched the Lions or paid attention to the roster because their conclusions were based on things that happened 5-6 years ago. So I kind of turned it off. But I want to help the process of insightfulness. The next section, I want to talk about reflecting. All right, reflecting. We Lions fans have been through a lot, and a lot has changed over the past 2 years. I think it's both interesting and helpful, rewarding, to reflect sometimes on who we are, what we have been through, and how we can shape our experiences moving forward. Learning to face ourselves, reflecting, can be powerful because it allows us to more intentionally seek the good shit that we want. Okay? Perhaps that's less anxiety, less anger, less arguing, less bad feelings. Maybe we can get over a loss or a bad series quicker. I'm not saying we all have to get along and be softies, right? That is not the point at all. And this conversation comes up often in therapy with combat veterans, right? Tough guys, tough women. Because people say in my office, they say, I do not want to become soft. I do not want to be someone who sits on the couch and doesn't stand up for himself and doesn't stand up for others and fight for what he needs and wants. And I say, hell yeah, of course not. But sometimes the needle is pegged a little too far in one direction. We do not want to be someone who is just sort of walking around crying all the time and not standing up for themselves. On the other hand, sometimes anger gets a little out of control. Our anger response gets a little too much, and it can cause problems in our life. Sometimes our impulsive behaviors, sometimes the way we communicate, it's a little bit rough, and it causes problems. And so then I ask the question, what do you want? Do you want to stay there? Or do you want to move the needle in the direction? Maybe a little bit, maybe a lot. Probably not over here, right? I know you're following what I'm saying here. So the question I want to ask Lions fans is, do you want to feel and hear and express more joy, satisfaction, better connection, appreciation, community? If the answer is no, then fine. You don't even have to stop listening if you want. That's fine. But brothers and sisters, we are in good times with these Detroit Lions, a period of success and victory and confidence. Our team is a contender. For me, that's surreal sometimes. There are times over the last season, I was like, I can't believe I'm having so much fun. This is so weird. Enjoying games, enjoying press conferences afterwards, enjoying all these different podcasts that I listen to during the week. And it's pretty amazing that we can go into the next season anticipating that we're in the hunt for the whole enchilada. Let that sink in. Reflect on that shit for a second. Everything has changed. And in some ways, many of us are still kind of emotionally, mentally catching up to where we are. And there's not a lot of other fan bases right now, I think, who are in this situation, at least not in the NFL. Other teams fan bases have gone through the process of going from perennial losers to contenders, right? 20 years ago, the Saints, whatever, right? Then they win a Super Bowl. And since then, they've been in contention for the playoffs almost every year. Maybe not last year. Seahawks, growing up, they stunk. That changed 15 years ago. They changed their culture. The fan base knows it. The fan base is on board. They have expectations. And the Colts, too. I remember growing up, Colts were kind of sad, kind of like the Lions in some ways. Then Peyton Manning comes around, and they became something else. They have a different expectation now. So I think this, our drought of playoff wins and our experience of bad ownership. Yeah, I said it, bad ownership. I know many of you say it too. Bad management, coaching, right? Different kinds of coaching. Maybe this weren't. I'll just stop it there. I'll get to that later. But everything got turned on its head. Everything changed for us fans. We're finally being rewarded. Next, I want to talk about change and adapting. There was a Greek philosopher who said, the only constant in life, and by the way, I'll stop before I say it. Many people across many cultures have said this and expressed this across human history. But I saw one Greek philosopher said, the only constant in life is change. And some of you hear that and say, yeah, man, that is true. And some of you hear that and say, wait, what? Whoa, yeah. Because sometimes in different areas of our life, we hold on to what we think is the way it's supposed to be, because that provides us a sense of security, less anxiety. You don't have to worry about the unknown and what the future is. We want things to stay the same. We have a tight grip on it, but we all humans know life is constantly changing, at least in this context, because everyone's aging. Opinions change. Abilities change. Bodies change, right? That is really the only constant in life. And so I want us to just reflect on that and move forward into this next discussion. We Lions fans have been through a lot of good change. One reason why this has felt so good is because we've been through so much pain. And I think it's awesome on all the different podcasts I listen to, how you can hear hosts and callers, and people doing the mailbag, expressing confidence, satisfaction, joy, questions that are not just, who the fuck are we going to get rid of this guy, and why does our entire defense stink, right? It's not that. It's, we're trying to solve problems. What about that third wide receiver spot right now? What's that? What about our eighth lineman? Who is that going to be? That's what we're following. Wow, it's so much better than what we've seen in the past. Okay. And you probably hear it too, right? I'm just going to mention this. The POD guys, I love listening to those guys. Well, I hope they come back with something. Jeremy Reisman, all those guys. I hope they come back with another format. But Eric Schlitt, Breakdown Pod, Not the Same Old Lions. One of these years, Colton Pouncey, the Pride Podcast, and the Roar of the Lions UK. If you have not listened to those guys, give it a shot. I'm looking at my acronym here on my outline. ROTL UK. They know their shit, and they're legit fans. But I hear callers and hosts expressing appreciation for the team, even national pundits. What the hell, man? For the most part, people on the Ringer and ESPN, even Colin Cowherd, is like constantly talking about how much confidence he has in this team. But yeah, they'll get back to deep into the playoffs. So there's some interesting questions for our fan base as we're in these good times. How do we go through each week of the season? Anxious? Bitter if we lose? Angry? Are we spewing vitriol? Well, because we have done those things in the past. We have felt those things in the past many times. There's patterns of that. But this context is different. And back during the Matt Millen years, yeah, that front office deserves some of that vitriol for sure. That shit just did not get better, right? And it got to 0-16. You're around for that? I'm sorry. I was too. I'm with you. But things are different. But still, how do we approach games against formidable opponents like the Rams week 1? Play the Seahawks early in the season. Like, I play that team again early in the season? Somebody play somebody else? I mean, I want to beat them. I want to beat them. Yeah. The Rams, right? Really good team, really good quarterback. They can catch you. Even after that, the roster is not one of the strongest, one of the top 5 rosters in the NFL. That freaking quarterback, Matthew Stafford, can nail you. He can get you. But how do we approach it? Chalk it up as an L, right? We play good teams. If we play the Ravens again, that loss sucked last year. But if we play them again, I'm in. Got it. I'm not chalking it up as a loss. I mean, maybe if I have to pick a score, 3.4, maybe 4. Sure, but I'm not looking at any game of the season and saying, yep, definite loss. But in the past, we did that a lot. How do we handle divisional losses? What if we lose to Minnesota? What if we lose to the Bears twice? Oh, shit. What if we lose to the Packers and the Bears twice each? The boos come out, right? Paper bags on the head, anger, terrible, fire everybody. Is that where do we go? How do we handle it? How do we react? How do we react to the draft? I thought this past year was really interesting. I reacted for the first time in many years. Very different. In the past, I love the draft, by the way. I follow the draft as close as anybody I know. I know every player every year in the first round, second round, most in the third, many in the fourth, and some in the fifth. Right? This year, kind of paid attention. Kind of interesting. What's Brad Holmes going to do? Stay put. Pick somebody. Move up. Okay. Move back. Okay. Trust. Confidence. That was really fun. That was a lot less anxious experience because in the past it was, man, you cannot miss. You cannot miss on our first round pick. Cannot miss on our second round pick. Cannot miss on our third round pick. They got to be starters. Fourth round pick got to start. Not so much now. That's kind of nice. We've all seen the venom spewed, when they didn't take Kalijah Kancey or Bijan Robinson. How dare you? If you're going to take a running back while you were there, why don't you stay patient? Worked out okay. Kayvon Thibodeau, can't pass on talent. Okay, moving back. Reuben Foster, hell, why would we take that guy? Should have taken it. Aaron Curry? Maybe, maybe not. There was, the responses, including from me, were just highly impulsive, emotional, anger, lots of anger. And I understand part of this is just the NFL experience, right? We are emotional, and that's what makes it fun. But part of it is also, at some point, kind of childish. So I don't know about you, but I have been through dark times with this team. And there have been many Sundays where I was bitter, angry, depressed, moody. And sure, I took that shit out on the people around me. I don't want to eat dinner. No. Whenever people say, there's seasons where I disconnected halfway through because I just that enough of this crap, right? Grab the phone, start swiping, deleting my podcast. No, I don't listen to that. I'm not going to listen to that. Not a lot of joy there, right? Winning does change a lot, but the effects of the past 20 years are still lingering, aren't they? For many of us. Some people have kicked it, but for some people, that SOL phrase is still in the back pocket. As soon as you see it, as soon as you feel a sense there's a downturn, some people are going to whip that shit out. It's the way it goes, I guess. But what if the Lions go 1-3 to start the season? What if they go 2-4 in the division? What if they lose 3 games in a row at home? We go back to the old behaviors, hopefully not too much. Some of it's funny. Yeah, I got it. But, and when we do those, when we do get angry, we do respond, negative, vitriol, are we doing it to protect ourselves? I think that's a really interesting question because we've been hurt before, right? If you've ever gotten to psychology, you might have heard the concept that anger is a secondary emotion. That opens up some interesting discussions across my life and a lot of other people's lives too, right? What are we protecting, right? What are we really, why are we angry, really? What's going on down there? Are we hurt? Oftentimes, yeah, that's it. Okay. I want to talk about negativity bias next. Negativity bias. Negativity bias has been explained through many different studies and many different metaphors. And it's not a bad human behavior. It's kind of necessary. It helped us as a human race, if we look at it in evolutionary terms. It helped us get here, right? Living in the 21st century with, for the most part, hopefully all you listeners have all your basic needs being met. Food, water, shelter, safety, protection, security. Okay? Things are going so good for most of us, we can just sit around and talk about a sports franchise. That's pretty sweet. Some of us even have enough money to go to a game. I know how much it costs. I've been to a game like 2 years ago. So it's pretty nice in a way that our ancestors went through the painstaking process of developing a negativity bias because it ensured our survival. Imagine, just stick with me through this. Imagine you're a human walking around 15,000 years ago. Your family is hungry because the Whole Foods Corporation has not yet formed, bringing healthy, non-processed foods to an affluent neighborhood near you. So you're walking around looking for fruit, vegetables, something. There's no animals, there's no chance of protein, but you got your foraging together. You got little kids, and you got an aunt and uncle, and you got grandma with you. Okay? And you see one of your little kids charge for a bush because there's a little piece of red fruit in it. And you know the kid's about to grab it, put it in his mouth, and eat it. And you yell out, no, and you go after him, and you grab him by the back of the whatever they were wearing 15,000 years ago, and you pull him back, and you yell at him, and you yell at the whole family. You say, never, ever, don't ever eat this thing. How dare you? That was dumb. Can maybe going overboard a little bit. Maybe not. Maybe you're just trying to protect them, okay? Negativity bias. Why is this example, why is it significant to us? Well, maybe it happened because when you were a kid, your grandma, your aunt told you the story about Uncle What's-His-Face was walking with his kids one day, and they grabbed a red fruit, and they all got really sick. A couple of them died. Whoa! Let's not do that again. You see your kid charge for it, and you stop him, and you yell at him, and you try to stick it in them, and how dare you? That was dumb. They're not going to do that. We've told you. What if it was a strawberry? What if everybody's low on vitamins? And, that's too bad. didn't work through that. It doesn't mean that what's going on is really bad, but your pattern that you're searching for, right? Humans are always searching for patterns. You're trying to find the negative. Where were the problems? Where are the problems? Because if we avoid that, we can keep moving forward. You don't want your kids to get sick. You certainly don't want the worst to happen. So that's why we reacted that way. This is a learned behavior. It's a conditioned response in humans. Negativity bias has helped us humans survive and avoid repeated, serious mistakes, problems for as long as we've been around. Our brains are always searching for patterns, and finding the negative pattern helps us avoid situations that threaten our survival. But we're not talking about fucking survival here, Lions fans. We're just talking about us and our sports team, right? There's that separation. This is not that serious. And so in some context, negative bias, our negative reactions towards things are, dare I say, kind of immature, certainly unnecessary at times. But if we don't address it, it's going to stick with us. We're going to continue to be governed by impulses if we don't face it, reflect it, and challenge it, right? The Lions have burned you in the past many times. Me too. For decades, they were the bad fruit that we kept going back to because of our emotional attachment. By the way, emotional attachment to a sports franchise is a whole nother discussion. Why do we get so attached to things, right? Maybe, sorry, someone's singing out. Maybe shame on us for sticking with them for so long during those million years. Maybe it shouldn't have just been the complaining. Maybe we should have taken a step away and ownership would have learned something better. I don't know. Those are debates for another time. But, you know, the past does not have to reflect the present or the future. Put it another way, the present does not have to be affected or as affected by our past. It will be to a degree. But look around. Everything has changed. We are learning to change, right? One reason why it's worth discussing reflection, change, and adapting is because it can improve our experience. It can make some things go better. We do this throughout our lives. You're doing it in some way, in relationships or finances, yard work, grocery shopping, car shopping, home repair, all right? Are you picking up what I'm putting down here? Are you seeing it, Lions fans, right? Changing and adapting can help us heal. It can help things go better. It can help us enjoy the various contexts of our lives to a greater degree. Even though we'll still have impulses to kick and scream and yell and complain and toss vitriol around and whine. We do that, but you know, we also understand we're kind of being immature when we do that. You know? And part of this is the NFL experience. I get it. I know. But maybe there's some room for us to grow as a fan base. And I hope we all realize negativity does have consequences. It can compound our stress and ill feelings, right? All that booing that happened over those years in Ford Field. You don't think that affected the players, coaches? Maybe they deserve it sometimes. Maybe we're really booing at the front office. It's not the players, but we're still booing, and it gets dropped onto the players, right? All that negativity. I'm not saying everything should be rosy and sunny and perfect and wonderful. Fuck that. I'm not saying that, and I would never say that. But, and, you know, I've told you some of the places that I've been, things that I've done, and the people that I meet with, right? These people that I've witnessed every week, every day of my work week, too. People who experience awful shit. It really does happen to people. So please just go a step deeper with me and look at the way we've acted before, the negativity, and why we did it. If you look at it with me, you might say that we often get angry and we get negative and we complain because we are protecting ourselves, just like our ancestors did for all those generations. I understand at some point you might kind of be like, what is this dude talking about? I'm getting into mental health, right? And maybe it applies to your life. Maybe you're interested. Maybe you're not. That's okay, whatever it is. And I'll finish up with this. You know, in therapy, we help people who finally come to the point where they say, something's got to change. Maybe it might be habits. It might be thought patterns. It might be interactions. It might be words people say. It might be behaviors, choices. And it's really a beautiful, profound thing to witness that when someone says that. You know, when someone says, I've suffered long enough. That's really amazing. And so to heal, I want to let you know, to change, we got to do a little bit of work. You can't just go from here to here just by deciding you're going to go. You actually have to go there. And we have to learn how to change. We do have to start understanding some different things. And waiting around for the lottery of the universe to just fix things, or for some other person to fix stuff for us, right? I'm not going to do anything until she does. Okay, that's one way to go. That is one way to go. Or to wait for some singular draft pick or free agent to make it all better, Trey Flowers, right? That guy. What did that signing solve? You've heard Chris and Jeff Risdon say Lions fans are going to have to learn to. That's what's going on here. That's what I'm trying to help. How do we learn to be Lions fans in this new era? What is our identity? Because everything has changed, And just like the Lions coaches, players, the front office, corporate leadership, ownership, change happened. They are different. This team is different. The front office is different. And now we get to be different, right? And just like a wise man once said about all that negativity and all that pain and all the vitriol and all the kind of immaturity, we've had enough of that shit. Love it. Let's go Lions.